Nobody ends up in Paraguay by accident. There's no famous ruin here, no landmark everyone's racing to photograph, no UNESCO site crowded with buses in high season. It sits landlocked in the middle of South America, bordered by Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia. And for 2 centuries, the rest of the world has mostly just looked past it. That's exactly what's kept it intact. 7 million people here live at a pace the rest of the continent gave up on decades ago. This is a look at what that actually means. Not simple as in behind the times, but simple as in a life still whole enough to be lived slowly, on purpose. Not one single postcard image, but dozens of small ones. A shared drink, a blended language, a forest nobody rushed to tame, a dam that changed everything, and a family that still carries water by hand, a short drive from it. And by the end of this film, you'll understand why so many of the people who do stumble into this country end up leaving with something they didn't expect to find. It starts with something so ordinary, most Paraguayans don't think twice about it. A thermos of cold water, moving hand to hand before the sun is even fully up. In Asunción, before most offices open, a cup packed with green yerba leaves and iced water is already circling a group of people. One person pours. Everyone drinks through the same metal straw. Then it moves on. In one shaded yard on the edge of the city, a grandmother pours the first round herself, while her grandchildren argue over a game, switching from Guaraní to Spanish and back again mid-sentence without ever slowing down to think about it. Nobody in that yard would call this remarkable. It's just Tuesday. This is tereré, and calling it a drink undersells it. It's a scheduled pause, built into the day on purpose. Office workers do it, construction crews do it, students do it on the curb before class. It's such a defining part of daily life that UNESCO has formally listed the practice itself, not the plant, not the drink, but the ritual of pausing together, as living cultural heritage. Paraguay even has an official day built entirely around friendship, tracing back to a movement started here in the 1950s that later spread worldwide. And there's a local version of Secret Santa, Invisible Friend, where the gift giver's identity stays hidden until the very last moment. None of this is small talk. It's what a life looks like when nobody's in a hurry to fill the silence. But the strangest part of how people communicate here isn't the ritual. It's the language itself. Because half the time, people aren't fully choosing which one they're speaking in. Paraguay has 2 official languages, Spanish and Guaraní, and most people don't pick one. They blend them mid-sentence into something called jaguars. Guaraní carries the emotional weight, family, humor, insults, soccer, grief. Spanish handles the paperwork, courts, universities, government forms. What makes this rare is that Guaraní is an indigenous language that never became a museum piece. Colonial-era documents show it being used in real political letters and disputes centuries ago, not just inside mission churches. In most of the Americas, the colonizers' language eventually buried the original one entirely. Here, it never did, because nobody here was ever in a rush to trade it away. Millions of people alive today grew up thinking in both languages, depending on which room of the house they're standing in. That same unforced pace is written into the houses themselves. Traditional rural homes are long and open, 2-bedroom blocks facing each other, with a shared central room between them for cooking, eating, and receiving guests. Deep roof overhangs keep direct sun off the walls. Doors line up front to back to pull any breeze straight through, and outside, red dirt roads stretch toward the horizon, in a heat haze that never seems to lift. In the yard sits a wood-fired clay oven, still used today to bake the cornbread this country can't imagine a table without. Steam curling off it every morning, the same way it has for generations. The oven itself is often older than anyone using it, passed down the way a piece of furniture might be elsewhere. Except this one still earns its keep every single day. That same yard, in many rural households, still has no water tap, rain barrels, hand-dug wells, water carried on foot, even in homes where nearly everyone already owns a smartphone. Children in some communities still walk 20 or 30 minutes each way to fetch water before school, a routine so ordinary to them that they rarely mention it unless someone from outside asks. Their parents made the same walk as children, and in some families, so did their grandparents. It isn't a life without modern conveniences. It's a life that's kept only the conveniences worth keeping and left the rest. A phone gets signal here long before a pipe gets built, and nobody seems especially bothered by which one came first. And nowhere is that clearer than at the dinner table, where some of what gets cooked isn't about hunger at all. The Paraguayan day runs on its own private clock. Hot mate at dawn, a small bite mid-morning, a late lunch of grilled meat, cassava, and stew that can stretch well past what most countries call lunchtime. Cassava, mandillo, sits at the center of almost everything. Boiled, fried, or ground into starch, it shows up in more dishes here than rice or bread does anywhere else. Chipa takes that starch and bakes it into a ring with cheese and egg, straight out of the Tatacua clay oven. Sopa Paraguaya, despite the name, isn't a soup at all. It's a dense, savory cornbread. Beiju fries that same cassava starch into something crisp outside and soft within. Payagua mascada folds it around beef into a fried patty. Reviro is little more than fried flour, broken into pieces, cheap and filling. The kind of food that has kept working families fed for generations. None of it needs a single luxury ingredient to feel like comfort. Then, there's food that isn't about hunger at all. On the 1st of October, families cook a corn and bean dish, specifically to ward off a folklore figure said to represent poverty and the lean season. 2 months earlier, on the 1st of August, people drink a small shot infused with rue and lemon, meant to chase bad luck away before it shows up. Nobody treats these as literal magic. They're small, repeated acts of care, a simple way of saying the family is still together and the year will be all right. Even something as small as a family's fresh cheese, salted lightly and paired with sweet cane syrup, carries this same idea. It doesn't need refrigeration, doesn't need a recipe written down, and doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to be made the way it's always been made, by whoever happens to be in the kitchen that morning. To understand how far that simplicity actually stretches, you have to leave the kitchen completely and head into the harshest, driest region in the country. A single river splits Paraguay almost exactly in half, and the two sides barely resemble each other. The Paraguay River runs down the center of the country, feeding into the larger Paraná River along the southern border, the same river system that has carried trade, fish, and families for centuries, and still marks much of the border with Argentina today. To the east, green, humid land where the last remnants of the Atlantic forest still cling to the hillsides, alongside patches of Cerrado savanna and pockets of Pantanal wetland that bleed north into Brazil. To the west, the Gran Chaco, a vast expanse of thornbush and heat that covers more than 60% of the country's land, but holds almost none of its people. 11 distinct ecoregions exist inside this one small nation. Wetland, savanna, dense rainforest, thorn scrub, sometimes shifting within a single afternoon's drive. In the northeast, the Chaco gradually turns to marsh, where the Nyembuku wetlands flood every rainy season and force entire villages to travel by canoe instead of road. Further south, near Encarnacion, the Paraná widens out into sandy beaches that locals treat as their own private coastline, in a country with no ocean at all. Dust rises off red dirt roads in the Chaco long before you ever see the truck causing it, visible for miles across land flat enough to make distance feel meaningless. It's a landscape almost nobody pictures when they think of South America. No glaciers, no famous peaks, nothing built for a postcard. What it has instead is scale, a country roughly the size of California, holding 11 separate worlds inside its borders, most of them still largely unphotographed. And it's wild enough, still, to hold on to animals most of the continent has already pushed out. Jaguars still move through the Atlantic forest remnants in the east, though rarely seen. The canopy here is thick enough to hide almost anything, and most people who've lived nearby have never once caught a glimpse. Pumas share that same territory, along with ocelots small enough to pass through underbrush most predators can't, and margays that spend nearly their whole lives in the trees. Giant anteaters shuffle across the Cerrado grasslands, dragging their tails behind them, like something out of an older world, sniffing out termite mounds with a sense of smell built for almost nothing else. Capybaras, the largest rodents on Earth, graze in loose family groups along the wetland edges, entirely unbothered by how close they let people get, floating half-submerged in the shallows when the heat gets too heavy. Hundreds of bird species pass through or nest in the wetlands and forest canopy, drawn by water and cover that development hasn't yet reached. Toucans in the humid east, rheas striding across the open Chaco floor like flightless, long-legged ghosts, and herons standing motionless at the water's edge. In the driest stretches of the Chaco, animals have adapted to almost no water at all, pulling moisture from cactus flesh, resting through the worst of the heat, moving only at dawn and dusk. This variation supports an extraordinary range of life, but it also means the Chaco and the Atlantic forest respond very differently to the same pressures. Agriculture, fire, and a shrinking water table, neither ecosystem was built to survive on its own. Nature here doesn't show everything at once. Most of it only appears once people slow down enough to actually look, which is exactly what happened with one animal nobody expected to find alive at all. For decades, science believed a wild, cactus-eating animal called the Chacoan peccary, locally the tagua, had gone extinct thousands of years ago, known only from fossils. Then, in the 1970s, researchers found it alive, deep in the Chaco's thorn forest. Indigenous communities there had known it was alive the entire time. Nobody outside the region had ever bothered to ask them. But that isn't the strangest thing hiding in this landscape. On the Paraná River sits the Itaipu Dam, one of the largest hydroelectric structures on the planet, generating enough electricity that Paraguay sells the surplus straight to Brazil and powers a large share of its own grid besides. Before the dam was finished, that same river ran over the Guairá Falls, a system once ranked among the highest volume waterfalls anywhere on Earth. In 1982, the rising reservoir simply swallowed it. Not erosion, not drought. A deliberate decision made in the name of progress, and it has not been seen since. Here's the part that's easy to miss. This is a country generating enough electricity to help light up a neighboring nation. And yet a short drive from that same dam, families are still carrying their own water home by hand. One story, an animal everyone assumed was gone, quietly still alive. Another, a wonder everyone knew was real, quietly made to disappear in exchange for power that doesn't always reach the people closest to it. That contradiction sits at the center of everything else in this film. Redstone ruins are scattered through southern Paraguay, the remains of Jesuit mission towns where Guaraní communities were once organized around churches, workshops, printing presses, even astronomy. At one mission, a priest and his Guaraní assistants built telescopes and sundials entirely from local materials, tracking the night sky from deep inside the forest. At another site, the massive church was never finished, abandoned mid-construction when the Jesuits were expelled in 1767, leaving walls exactly as they were left that night. At the largest of these missions, the plaza alone once stood large enough to hold the entire surrounding community for mass, a scale that still feels strange against the quiet forest surrounding it today. Guaraní artisans carved stone facades, combining European saints with local plant and animal motifs, a hybrid style found nowhere else. When the missions were abandoned, the forest didn't wait long to reclaim them. Tree roots now run straight through walls that once held printing presses and music schools. Both sites are now recognized as UNESCO World Heritage locations, and both hold two truths at once: genuine craftsmanship, built on top of a system that reorganized an entire people by force. The ruins don't resolve that tension. They just sit there, quietly holding both halves of it. Not every settlement in the Chaco has Guaraní roots. In the towns of Philadelphia and Loma Plata, road signs, schools, and churches carry German lettering. These are Mennonite colonies, founded by settlers who arrived from Canada in the late 1920s and later from the Soviet Union in the 1930s, fleeing persecution and looking for nothing more complicated than a place to farm their own land and be left alone. In schools and churches, standard German is still used. At home, most families speak Plautdeutsch, a dialect carried here from Central Europe and preserved almost nowhere else in South America. A century later, they've built dairy cooperatives, processing plants, and fully self-sufficient towns, out of terrain most outsiders considered unlivable. Proof that a simple life and a difficult one aren't always the same thing. That land was never empty, though. It belonged first to the Enxet, Nivaclé, Ayoreo, and other Chaco peoples. And today it's shared, not always evenly, between the Mennonite colonies and the communities who were already living that same self-sufficient rhythm long before anyone arrived from Europe at all. Roads built for Mennonite dairy trucks are often the same roads now, cutting further into land those original communities depend on. Even the Mennonite communities themselves aren't one single story. The earliest arrivals settled the driest, hardest interior first, while later, waves of settlers found slightly gentler land closer to existing trade routes, small differences in soil and rainfall that still shape which colonies are wealthier today and which ones remain closer to the subsistence farming their founders started with a century ago. Some of the original Chaco communities have taken the instinct to live apart even further than sharing land uneasily. Some have chosen not to be found at all. Guaraní identity is only the most visible layer of Paraguay's indigenous world. The country is home to 19 distinct indigenous peoples, spread across 5 separate language families, each with its own territory, its own farming or hunting practices, and its own relationship with the modern state. Guaraní communities in the east live very differently from Enchet or Nivaclé communities in the Chaco, who live differently still from smaller, more scattered groups further west. Some organized around fishing and river trade, others around seasonal hunting circuits that move with the rains. Among them, some Ayoreo communities actively avoid all contact with the outside world, making them one of the last such groups anywhere outside the Amazon basin. Isolation, for them, isn't accidental. It's a position held onto through decades of missionary contact, land seizure, and disease that devastated other groups who made contact before them. Entire family lines were lost within a generation of first contact elsewhere in the Chaco. And that history is not abstract to the communities that remain uncontacted today. It's the exact reason they've stayed that way. It's a choice built on hard-earned caution, and it depends entirely on one thing: a forest large enough and left alone enough to disappear into. That's exactly what's disappearing. Cattle ranching and soy expansion are cutting new roads deeper into the Chaco every year, and every new road brings machinery a little closer to land these communities never agreed to share. For a people who've chosen not to enter the modern world, a shrinking forest isn't just an environmental loss, it's the loss of the ability to keep choosing at all. Simplicity here isn't only about how people live, it's also in what they choose to make with their hands. In the town of Itaugua, women have hand-woven Nyanduti lace for 4 centuries, a technique so fine the finished pattern looks like a spiderweb spun out of sunlight. Watch a lacemaker's hands work, and there's no rushing visible anywhere in the motion. Nothing about it is mechanized. Each piece is the product of hours the maker was willing to spend on something that will never be sped up. That same patience runs straight through the country's music. The Paraguayan harp carries much of the country's festive sound. Light, without the complex pedal system of its European cousins, but capable of extraordinarily fast, cascading runs that seem to contradict everything else about how unhurried life here can feel. Alongside it, the guitar tradition here produced one of Latin America's most important composers, Agustín Barrios Mangoré, whose work fused classical technique with unmistakably South American rhythm and feeling, and who spent much of his life performing across the continent while insisting on including his own Guaraní heritage in concert stages that rarely made room for it. In 1925, a composer named José Asunción Flores took the fast, cheerful rhythm of the traditional Paraguayan polka and slowed it deliberately into something new, the guarania, aching and melancholic, built for songs about love, homeland, and exile. It's now internationally recognized as intangible cultural heritage. Where the polka pushes a crowd into motion, the guarania does the opposite on purpose. It asks a room to sit still and feel something instead. And in village festivals, the bottle dance shows that same instinct in the body. Women balance stacked bottles on their heads while spinning, their upper half staying almost perfectly still. A skill built through years of unhurried practice, not shortcuts, often taught from mother to daughter long before either of them thinks of it as a performance at all. Faith moves at the same unhurried pace. Every December, pilgrims travel on foot, by bicycle, or by car to Cacupé for the country's largest pilgrimage, some walking for days to reach the Basilica by the 8th. During Holy Week in the town of Tañarandi, thousands of candles and oil lamps are lit along a path meant to represent the road to heaven, while singers walk it, performing oral tradition hymns passed down by voice alone, never written down, each generation simply teaching the next one by ear. In early May, families gather for Kurusu Ara, to clean graves, decorate crosses, and share a meal together at the cemetery, treating the day less like mourning and more like a reunion with people who are still, in a sense, considered part of the family gathering. San Juan Ara brings blindfolded games, bonfires, and food stalls to villages across the country each June, a night where children and adults play the same games side by side. At night, people still tell stories of the Pombero, a forest spirit blamed for strange noises in the dark and said to punish anyone who disturbs nature carelessly. Nobody insists it's literally true, but almost everyone still tells the story anyway, the same way it's always been told. Because some things are worth keeping even after you've stopped believing them outright. Follow the Paraguay River far enough from the capital, and the pace slows even further. Mist still sits low over the water most mornings before the heat burns it off. Families here fish with the same nets and the same patience their grandparents used. Then farm the same narrow strips of riverbank in the afternoon. Nothing about this rhythm has meaningfully changed in generations. Not because nothing better came along, but because nothing better needed to. A boat pulled up on the mud at dawn. A fire started with wood gathered the night before. A full day organized entirely around water levels and light. Children here learn to swim before they can properly read, and know the river's moods, when it's safe, when it's rising, when to stay close to shore, the way children elsewhere learn traffic lights. It's one of the clearest pictures in the entire country of a life still measured in mornings, not minutes. None of this happened without cost. Before Europeans arrived, the eastern forests belonged to Guaraní communities, and the Chaco belonged to entirely separate peoples. There was never one single, original tribe, only many. Asunción was founded in 1537, and for a time was even known as the Mother of Cities, since expeditions launched from it went on to found other major settlements across the region. Jesuit missions reorganized Guaraní life for nearly 2 centuries, until their expulsion in 1767. Independence came in 1811, almost without bloodshed, a rare thing in a continent where most independence movements turned into prolonged wars. Then came the harder chapters. An isolationist ruler sealed the country off entirely in the early 1800s, restricting foreign contact so tightly that Paraguay barely traded with its own neighbors for decades. From the mid-1860s to 1870, Paraguay fought a catastrophic war against 3 neighboring nations at once. A war so devastating that a large share of the adult male population was lost, and women were left to rebuild entire towns, farms, and industries in its aftermath. A period still spoken about here, with real weight, generations later. In the 1930s, a second war was fought against Bolivia, over the Chaco itself, where thirst killed as many men as bullets did, and where dug wells still mark old front lines across the desert today. And from the 1950s into the late 1980s, a long dictatorship under Alfredo Stroessner ruled through surveillance, exile, and fear, its full extent only proven decades later, when secret internal files known as the Archives of Terror were discovered and turned decades of rumor into documented evidence, exposing coordination with other South American dictatorships in tracking down political dissidents across borders. Every one of those events could have pushed this country toward the same fast, noisy development path most of its neighbors took. Instead, in 100 small daily choices, it mostly didn't. Soy, cattle, hydropower, and border trade generate real income here now. But that income is paid for mostly by the Chaco's forest and the people who depend on it. Remember the dam that sells its surplus power to an entire neighboring country, sitting a short drive from families who still carry their own water home by hand. That's not a coincidence, and it's not unique to one town. Simplicity was never free. Someone, somewhere, is always the one keeping the pace slow enough for everyone else. The question this country still hasn't fully answered is whether that trade can ever be made evenly, whether the benefits of slowing down can reach the same people who are quietly paying the cost of it. Nowhere is this rhythm louder or happier than on a soccer field. Football here isn't a spectator sport bought and sold on television deals. It's something almost every child in the country has played barefoot on packed dirt before they ever owned a proper ball. Empty lots, dead-end streets, and dry riverbeds all double as pitches, with rocks or sandals marking the goalposts, and nobody keeping official score beyond bragging rights until dinner. Asunción's stadiums fill for league matches with a kind of devotion that has very little to do with money and everything to do with belonging. Entire neighborhoods walking to the ground together, wearing the same colors their parents wore, singing the same chants, passed down the same way the Guaraní is. Paraguay has sent players to some of the biggest clubs and tournaments on earth, but the game that actually built those players happened on unpaved ground, with no coach, no schedule, and no admission fee. That gap between a global sport played for enormous sums elsewhere and the same sport played here for nothing but the joy of it says something true about the rest of this country too. The most valuable things rarely need the most expensive setup. A dirt lot and a worn-out ball can produce the same pure, complete happiness as a professional stadium. And here, that's not treated as a consolation. It's treated as the whole point. Long after the match ends and the field empties out, kids are still out there playing until it's too dark to see the ball, which, in its own small way, is this country's entire philosophy in miniature. As evening falls, the tereré flask is still moving hand to hand. The Guaraní is still playing somewhere. A woman in Itauguá is still bent over a lace pattern that will take her weeks to finish. Somewhere in the Chaco, the Tagua is still walking through the same thorn forest that swallowed a waterfall on the other side of the country. And in that same forest, families are still living by water they carry themselves, on a rhythm nobody imposed on them and nobody's taken away. On a dirt field somewhere, a game is still going, played by kids who will keep going until it's too dark to see the ball, the same way it's been played here for generations. Somewhere along the river, a boat is being pulled up onto the mud for the night, exactly the way it was pulled up the night before, and the night before that. Nobody ends up in Paraguay by accident. And maybe that's exactly why the people who do end up leaving with something they didn't expect. The sense that slowing down, on purpose, can be its own kind of progress. It isn't a lesson anyone here is trying to teach. Nobody in Asunción, or the Chaco, or along the river is performing simplicity for an audience that might be watching. It's just how the days happen to be lived, whether or not anyone outside is paying attention at all. That may be the truest thing about this entire country. Its most remarkable qualities were never built to be noticed in the first place. Paraguay didn't fall behind the rest of the world. It simply decided, again and again, in 100 small, unremarkable ways, not to chase it. In a shared drink, a blended language, a lace pattern nobody rushed, a forest nobody was in a hurry to tame. None of those choices made headlines. None of them were meant to. They just happened, quietly, the same way they still happen tonight, and will happen again tomorrow. whether or not this film ever finds its way back here. There is no ending to this story in the way a documentary usually needs one. No resolution, no final chapter, because nothing here was ever waiting to be finished. It was already whole, long before anyone thought to point a camera at it. If this journey gave you a reason to slow down for a minute, leave a like and subscribe. There are more hidden lives waiting to be found.